What's up, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Chaos reigns.
How did I knew you were gonna do that?
I thought about it last night that he was gonna do that.
You gotta.
Yeah, you gotta. I'd actually be disappointed if you didn't. My name is Jared. Today we're joined by the Show Me the Meaning crew. We got Ryan
In the house, what's up?
in the house, and in the house for the first time is Amanda. How's it going, Amanda?
It's fine. I mean, I just watched Antichrist, so it's like it's a moment for me. But
Like
I'm
just watched
Yeah.
it.
literally
You
just
ended it.
finished the end credits.
I don't know what you're feeling right now,
It's
but
a lot of different
I'm
things.
ready to dissect it.
Yeah.
I'm ready to. And we got Austin.
Yo, what up, Amanda? I bet you don't want to see a pair of scissors right now, dude.
Oh my
God.
god, come on, Austin.
I'm
Jesus
like gonna
Christ.
faint. I heard that like 4 people fainted at con.
Yeah.
and I like would have been one of them.
So today we're talking. We're doing it. We're doing
Yes,
Antichrist.
Antichrist.
The 2009.
This is a celebration. Wait, we got to get a golf clap in. I mean,
And it deserves a bigger clap. Give it a bigger
dude,
clap.
where's the bigger clap? We need to update. Oh, we got to yeah.
All right.
It deserves it.
The 2009 film, written and directed by Lars von Trier, starring Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg. As always, we're going to go around and see what people thought about the movie. We're going to go with what was it like the first time you watched it, and what was it like revisiting it? Let's start with Amanda.
Yeah.
Let's start with...
My roommate thought I was dying because I was screaming at the computer. Like I couldn't believe what was happening. I'm reeling. Yeah.
So this is your first time seeing
This
it?
is my first time seeing it. I knew nothing about it going in except that Lars von Trier is a sick fuck. And yeah, wow. It really, I knew that it was like gonna turn. Like I read the synopsis and knew that there was like torture involved, but I was not ready. And what was funny was for the first 75%, I was so fucking bored. And I was like, nothing's happening in this movie. And then all of a sudden, everyone was castrated. So that was a lot. It was a lot.
Have you seen other Lars von Trier movies?
I saw Nymphomaniac
Oh, okay.
1, and
Part one.
part 1, a film, and did not like it. But
Yeah, that's easily. That movie's not that good.
no, it's not. So that's my. I think that's actually my only other Lars von Trier that I've seen.
But you saw one that at least was explicit, so you were primed for something that was going to be similarly explicit, perhaps more disturbing.
Yeah. I'd say that's fair.
All right. Austin, what about you?
Yeah, so it might sound really ironic, or maybe not, but this film caused quite a stir in the theological and philosophical blogosphere in like 2009, 2011. And it's kind of a joke that if you're going to do graduate work in theology, you have to see Malick's Tree of Life and von Trier's Antichrist. And and so if people are interested, there are a shitload of think pieces out there from, like I said, circa 2009, 2010, 2011 on Antichrist and a lot of the themes that are in it. So I saw it then, and it was more like I engaged it as a piece of homework. But I've seen it a few times since then because Lars von Trier is one of my favorite filmmakers in the world.
You
so,
sick fuck.
I revisit. Yeah, I know. But so I revisit some of his films periodically. But this is one of the ones that I've kind of intentionally only skipped around. Like I don't need to see all of it in order to kind of get what I've wanted out of it. But last night I watched it for the whole way through for the first time, probably since the first time I watched it. Even though I've seen it in pieces and like pieces of it, like dozens and dozens of times over the years. And it was pretty fucking shocking still. Like, even though I knew everything that's happening, it's still, I mean, and not just the torture bits, but the creepy, kind of scary elements that, like even when she kind of starts to yell at herself, I don't remember what the words are that she's saying, but where you see the kind of almost other side of her kind of coming out at the end, which is kind of creepy and weird. And it's pretty fucking shocking even now, knowing what to fully expect. So don't feel bad, Amanda, because I've seen it and been prepared and still got fucked up from it.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, give it to us.
I mean, this is the granddaddy of the Von Trier movies, as far as I'm concerned. This is the best one. I think it. I mean, I.
Do you think this is his best film?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
If you don't like this movie, I think you can't be a Von Trier's head like me. This, to me, oddly enough, one of his most accessible ones. right? Because it tells, like, if you think about the story, the arc of figure and the big twist. I mean, spoiler alert now, but like, you know, when you find out the big twist of her knowing her son was gonna fall out that window. I mean, what a just operatic, she is the Antichrist, you know? I felt that moment every time, or I feel that moment every time I see the movie, just like masterstroke of storytelling with his usual transgressive, like pretty much, we've kind of talked about it before, like a trolley filmmaking sensibility, you know, where you can never really tell, are you trying to tell me something right now, or are you just trying to shock me, you know, with Lars von Trier? And I think it works in the vague, you know, for you not knowing it, how he means it. But yeah, I love this movie a lot. Like, I love how shocking it is. You know, like you guys said, it still holds up. As far as, and in terms of filmmaking wise, like, I love the slow-mo. This is the first time I'd ever seen that, like, shot with that weird Alexa camera where it slows it down, like the walnuts or whatever falling, the acorns, you know, things like that, the raindrops, the kid falling down, like that cinematically blew my mind the first time I'd seen it, just how in focus and detailed all that stuff was, then just the effective way he used it. So I thought that was awesome. The storytelling was cool. I usually don't like movies that are like broken up in chapters, but this worked, you know, really well. I like the parable aspect of it, the open-endedness of it, which sometimes I don't like. It's really hard to do despair well in movies, you know, and this movie nails it. Just like, I feel, you know, I've never experienced that, but I feel for these people. Anyway, as far as what it's saying, obviously we'll get into it, but, you know, kind of like it could be read like Jared's take on Audition, bitches be crazy. That's what
I said. That was a take.
A take, right? I'm not saying it was your take, but it was a take that you could take away. But I don't think that's all that this movie's saying. I mean, definitely, they kind of explicitly say it in the movie. You know, nature is chaotic. Fuck, you know, it doesn't give a shit about you. You know, so I like that in a movie.
Yeah,
it was. He's awesome. This movie's awesome.
Yeah, you know, I saw it in theaters around when it came out in 2009. I brought my roommate to it, and it was weird because when I saw it, I was in the place of Von Trier because I had read that this movie was really fucked up, and I brought my roommate to it, telling him nothing. So I just trolled my roommate, and I guess for that reason, just seeing him reeling in being tortured, I was able to enjoy the movie, and I've seen it since, and I really admire the film for how effective it is, how smart some of its directing is, how beautiful it is. But I gotta say, this time when I watched the movie, I think the movie really succeeded in its intended effect, which was to make me feel like shit. Because this movie like ruined my day yesterday. Yeah. It really fucked me up. And not only the scenes of genital mutilation, but also just Charlotte Gainsbourg's performance is so harrowing, and so deeply disturbing. I mean, it was rough. But at the end of the day, I still love the movie. So I think like my overall sentiment towards this movie is, thank you, sir. May I have another? But
yes.
Yeah, I had a good time reading about this movie, and I'm really interested to hear about more what the theological community or the theology community, whatever kind of community it is, has to say about this movie. But yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about, so let's just dive right into the recap. After the tragic death of their infant child, an unnamed therapist husband decides to take it upon himself to coach his unnamed wife through their prolonged grief. When his efforts at home prove fruitless, he decides to take her to the site of her greatest fear, the woods. They arrive at their cabin in the woods called Eden. He continues to challenge her to face her pain, but to mixed success. One night he goes into the attic and witnesses a stash of notes on her thesis about gynocide, or the killing of women, and sees that as she studied it, her sanity started to waver. She started to believe that women are evil. He eventually discovers that their son's feet were deformed by her, who deliberately put his shoes on the wrong way, contributing to the fall that took his life. She accuses him of wanting to leave her, and then proceeds to mutilate his genitals and screw a cement block onto his ankle. Her rage eventually subsides, and she tells him that when the three beggars arrive, someone must die. It's then revealed that she saw their son seconds before he fell to his death, but being in the throes of sexual ecstasy, chose to ignore it and let him die. She then mutilates her own genitals. The three beggars arrive, he takes the cement block off his ankle and kills her. On his way out of the forest, he sees a vision of the three beggars and faceless women roaming through the woods. End of movie.
Wow.
Yeah, so, God, where do you guys want to start?
Well, I think one thing that's interesting is both you and Ryan said the same thing, that that there's like a reveal at the end that supposedly intimates that she knew, and that somehow she wanted it to happen, that her son falls out the window. And I think that's obviously one reading of it. But I think a more interesting reading is the Freudian elements. You know, they intentionally mention Freud. The one bit where there's kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod, where she looks at her husband and is kind of like,
right.
You know,
Freud's dead.
Freud doesn't exist in modern psychology, right? He's completely been disreputed or whatever. And so I think there's an intentional wink, wink, like, but that's not really the truth, because this is a very Freudian film. So I wonder if we couldn't also say that one of the essential Freudian elements is this problem of like misremembering. And I think this fits into the larger theological elements that we can get into later, but that you always misremember the past, that the memories that you form in the present, they're never actually accurate. They're always just kind of fabulations of the present as you're reconstructing the past. And so you're kind of projecting new meanings into them. So it's not, I think that you could say, she really was the Antichrist, but I don't think that's it. It's more that nature itself is corrupted, and you can never go back to this Edenic state, even though their house is called Eden. And so because of that, this desire to go back is always something that you're going to misremember and misrecognize, and you're always going to distort it based on these other elements. So I think that's kind of something that we could think about as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, although I put it there in the recap, I agree that it's up for debate whether or not it's her guilt that she's projecting some sort of blame onto herself for seeing the kid. You know, maybe that it may not be actually how the events transpired.
Oh, man, definitely not. Like, well, for one, I was being hyperbolic earlier when I said she's the Antichrist. I mean, you know, just in the colloquial sense, she's
well,
somebody.
Up.
Well, we'll get into that. I mean,
right, but,
something is the Antichrist.
Sure,
perhaps.
but
nature is the Antichrist.
Right. But I mean, she's not like the devil with red horns underneath. But all I'm saying is that, Austin, so you really think that that the big reveal at the end is to say, is Lars von Trier saying, she's just misremembered this whole thing, and that it's like it was such a traumatic event that she had this weird post-traumatic stress disorder, memory loss? I don't think that's it at all. It's totally about how contrived and conniving and evil she is.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I feel like, because it's interesting because, like, she does think, no matter what, like, she thinks she failed as a mom. And I could see what Austin's saying about it being, like, a literal imagery of, like, the way she feels like she failed her kid.
I also think that this movie's too formless to really be able to apply a term like a big reveal. Because
that it was shot like a big reveal. It's like you've seen, it's a motif through the movie. You're seeing the same black and white, shots of them fucking and stuff.
And I think that's maybe. I mean, we're talking
it's
about Von Trier
payoff,
here.
Though,
it's a payoff. It's definitely emulating the style of a payoff, but it could just be a Von Trier troll, or at least put there, in a sense.
Disagree with all of you.
Well, think about this too. So at the bit that we're kind of discussing around is that she sees him, the boy, and then she continues to have sex because she's caught up in the thralls of enjoyment. She's like, fuck it, I want to pursue my own libidinal desires, right? But at the beginning, the boy walks by the room and watches them have sex, and they're unaware of him, and then he jumps out the window. So what I think is that there's something interesting that's almost like the little boy is brought into this conjugal relationship where what are mommy and daddy doing? Mommy is the object of my satisfaction, and daddy is the object of the thing that's thwarting me from getting my object of satisfaction. Therefore, I'm going to walk out the window. And it's not like I'm going to kill myself. But again, I think that Von Trier is intentionally juxtaposing her seeing him at the end, but also him seeing her at the beginning, and kind of trying to throw, it's a myth to try to say, let's explore these thematic concepts rather than try to be so literal with interpreting. So I agree with Jared. It's too formalist, I think, to say that there's just like some sort of Bong Joon-ho reveal.
Well, I think that the kid was going towards the window because kids like windows. Right.
Do kids like windows?
Yeah, they just like open doors and they want to go, you know. So, but then the woman wasn't. I mean, she hates this kid. Basically, is the reveal. She's been deforming its feet. Why would you do that? And you know, and I mean, well, she doesn't give a fuck about anything.
Okay, but even if you were to make that argument, which obviously, I think it is a reading of the film. We're not saying. I think all you're arguing is that it has a definitive meaning, whereas we're saying that maybe it doesn't, or there are multiple readings. We agree that obviously there is enough.
Well, you're saying it's obvious, and I'm saying.
Well, no, I'm saying obviously there is enough. No, I'm not saying so. I'm saying it's obvious that there is enough evidence to suggest that your reading is valid, but we're also pointing to other evidence to suggest that there could be an alternative reading. But even if you were to make the argument that she deliberately misformed his feet so that he would one day jump out of a window, that's a bit of a difficult thing.
No, just to make his life hell, you know?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different readings on that. Why don't we
because I think it's important to think, too, that nature, I think, is clearly the Antichrist here. Because the idea that nature is Satan's church is important. They're going to Eden. They're unnamed. They're man and woman, kind of like Adam and Eve, which Adam just means man in ancient Hebrew, right? That's what the word kind of derives from. And we have to remember the biblical narrative then. Eve is the one who brings sin into the world. She's the one who gets blamed. But what's the biblical narrative? She will be saved through childbirth. She will be saved by procreating. And what does nature mean? The word natura means being born. And so this idea is that natality is something that philosophers and theologians talk about, this idea of giving birth, of like the efflorescence of life or something like that, right? And this whole film is the opposite of that. It's like, no, nature isn't life-giving. Nature isn't something that will save us. Nature is corrupting, and it's violent, and it's chaotic, and it will kill you. And so she isn't a person that is named Janet or whatever, who has an identity that hates her son. She is supposed to be a placeholder to represent how nature corrupts even the feminine, even though the idea is, and this goes to the heart of her research, right, which was exploring how women were abused and corrupted and attacked and violated by men, but rather what she does is she internalizes the violence of nature itself and turns all of that against everybody and says, no, even this thing that is supposed to be pure, that's supposed to save us all and bring life through birth, is itself corrupted because it's just chaos. And that's what she, I think, stands in for.
I mean, I do feel like, and I just read a bunch of like scholarly discussions about this movie where everyone disagrees with me. I do feel like fundamentally, like, it's a sexist film because you could never have a male character behave this way. It literally relies on everything we have preconceived notions about women being hysterical, because literally every 5 minutes she's either crying or fucking or screaming or just and literally, I don't know how Charlotte Gainsbourg pulled off such a good performance because there's no motivation to anything. Like, it's just bananas. So I feel like, okay, so there's that element. At the same time, it's kind of interesting because there is I feel like it also is about like motherhood and how she can't have sex anymore because she's a mom, and like she has sex and then her kid dies, and like she has to write her thesis, but she can't finish her thesis because her kid is crying. So like at the same time, there are elements that like are kind of feminist, so it's very confusing for me.
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting discussions about the film, is that there seems to be a lot of discussion of whether is the film misogynistic or is it about misogyny.
Right.
That's what I was just going to say. I think that's the really interesting ambiguity. What you just said, she is the hysteric in the Freudian sense. And again, I think that the Freudian themes are intentional. I think that they mention Freud on purpose so that you are thinking, is this woman the hysteric? And am I then saying that all women are hysterical, like Jared and Ryan were joking, bitches be crazy? Yeah. Or is it like I'm trying to challenge this idea that there's even a division itself between the man and the woman, and that violence is masculine and that women are not violent? And I'm just trying to say, no, nature itself will corrupt everything, and it corrupts us through the very maternal things that we think are supposed to save us through life giving, but they don't want to give life. They just want to fucking kill because nature's scary.
It's also like this is such a side note, but it's like funny because in film school, like every film professor would talk about Freud a lot, and every film book would talk about Freud a lot. And I would talk to my friends in psychology who were like, Freud is old newsman. Like only film majors care about Freud. So it's like I almost feel like it's an inside film joke that like Lars von Trier is like using Freud while like also saying, oh yeah, we all know that Freud's irrelevant, but filmmakers are still obsessed with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because I would say that, well, I don't think it's true that in psychology Freud is it, because psychodynamic therapy is still extremely important, which comes out of Freud. It's just the literal kind of weird ego psychology interpretation of Freud that's been disreputed for the most part. But the influence of Freud and the influence of the unconscious that gets developed later is so influential and it's so prominent. It's just that basically what people mean by that is that, oh, do you really just want to fuck your mom, bro? Which is never what Freud even said anyway. So it's really a misinterpretation of Freud that is disreputed. But if you look at cinema and if you look at like the themes that are exploited, like it's fucking everywhere. We talk about Freud all the time on this podcast, and not just because we're kind of like film geeks, but also because it's fucking there, man. Like it's there in our psychology, like we do things that we don't know why we're doing them and what's going on, and we misremember things. And I think that's something that von Trier intentionally is exploring, you know?
Totally.
What do you guys think about Willem Dafoe's character, and how does he function in this? Because I want to stay on the whole, is it misogynistic or is it about misogyny thing? Because
You mean he?
Yes. Yeah. What are we supposed to think about him? Because I've seen some readings that say that he's driving her to insanity, that he's being too overbearing, he's being arrogant in his insistence on reason, and it's because of him that drives her to this place of insanity. And then, once again, on the other hand, there's just bitches be crazy. But, I'll be honest, the first time I saw the movie, I thought of Willem Dafoe as purely a victim, just a helpful guy trying to help out.
Yeah, basically.
Wait, that's hilarious. Literally, like, the number one rule of psychology is, like, you can't psychoanalyze your own family. That's, like, literally number one. Like, just the fact that he thinks he can do that is so fucking arrogant.
Yeah, and she says that to him in the movie, for sure.
Right. So it's, like, acknowledged. But, yeah.
He loves she, okay? He loves she, and he'll do anything for she.
It would have been really interesting.
Her.
Well, by the
What's
end,
that, Amanda?
of course.
I think he hates her.
From the beginning?
Oh,
He's
you do?
like, he's like, let's go exploit your biggest fear so that you can get over grieving your child. I think he's punishing her.
It's called immersion therapy, Amanda.
Oh my God. Okay. That's like, not even.
Yeah, Amanda, what do you think do you think that he is like criticizing the masculine tendency towards dominance, or do you think that he's just kind of like repeating it? Like what's von Trier doing with him?
I think he's repeating it. I think he's like pretty simple. He's like an arrogant therapist who thinks he can fix his wife. Or he's also like kind of sadistic.
Did you mean he as in he, or he as in von Trier?
I meant he. Oh.
I was just...
Oh, no, I was saying, like, do you think that von Trier, how is von Trier treating Willem Dafoe's character?
I think he's supposed to be, like, an arrogant, self-absorbed, like, masculine id who thinks he can fix everything, but at the same time also kind of, like, enjoys driving his wife into hysteria.
It was... So...
You think he enjoys it? Yeah. Do you think he enjoys the violent sex that he gets from it, even though he tries to say no? Do you think there's something in the struggle that he actually does enjoy? Because I mean, this is one of the things that psychoanalysis will say, that everything comes from some sense of enjoyment. Even when you kind of repeat something that you don't like to do, it's because you enjoy the not liking it, right? So it's like he gets this like violent, weird sexual relations with her, but he's kind of like, no, we can't do this. But then he gives into it. Do you think that he like wants to do that there's something abusive about that or problematic about that in some other way?
I mean, everything about like the therapeutic relationship in this movie is so problematic. I have a question, having only seen Nymphomaniac. Is every female character in a von Trier movie like pathological about sex in some way? Because I feel like
Breaking the Waves, yes.
I feel like he's terrified of female sexuality, and he pathologizes it. Like,
I mean, in general, his female leads go through a lot. I mean, you could
Bjork
say,
fucking hates his guts.
whether she was in Dancer in the Dark. Whether or not it's exploring female sexuality, he's always either directly or indirectly torturing his female stars in his movies.
Yeah, I don't even think it's exploring. I think it's literally just pathologizing it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a really interesting documentary on behind the scenes of Dogville, and Nicole Kidman and oh God, what's the fucking Tarzan's dad's name? The actor that Skarsgård, Stellan Skarsgård, is that his name?
Yeah.
And it's like behind the scenes of Von Trier working with the two of them. And there's some pretty brutal scenes in Dogville as well. And Nicole Kidman, you can tell she's infuriated with him. But at the same time, in a weird sense, a lot of performers, and it depends on the actor, of course, but a lot of performers really enjoy, maybe that's their pathology, right? That's their neurosis, is that they enjoy having somebody kind of push them to these limits to release some sort of quote-unquote true performance or whatever. And so it's really interesting to watch. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a behind the scenes on Dogville, and it's absolutely fantastic. And it gives you a little bit kind of an insight into his method and his approach, and then his relationship with actors that might delve into that a little bit.
I mean, like, does anybody think he likes women?
Von Trier. I don't know him personally.
I mean,
like from his movies, like.
I don't know. Like so for example, I'm going to read. So there's a professor of history at Birkbeck College named Joanna Burke who wrote an article in The Atlantic about this, and she writes extensively about women's history with like sexual violence and stuff like that. And she is actually she defends this movie. Mm-hmm. She says, the man's violence is the heartless man, meaning Willem Dafoe's character, is the heartlessness of rationality. Patronizingly, he sneers at the woman's research project on gynocide. He's a rationalist cognitive therapist who bullies her into exposing her inner demons. In contrast, the woman embraces the mysterious, uncanny energies of the unconscious and unknowable elemental forces. Her violence against the man and her own body is unbounded. The scenes of her crushing his penis and then snipping off her clitoris and labia are graphic, but it's not designer violence intended to appeal and titillate in the same breath. Nor does it inspire compassion. Von Trier simply presents cruelty as there, serving no liberating function for the audience. Pain, its infliction, and its suffering is integral to life. Von Trier has admitted that, of all of his films, Antichrist comes closest to a scream. It exposes us to an untamed, erotic, and aggressive aesthetic without redemption. It jolts us out of a passive voyeurism and, in despair, leaves us, in the words of Handel, crying over a cruel fate. And the Handel thing that he's talking about, so the song in the beginning when it's black and white slow motion and the kid is jumping out the window is a song called Let Me Weep from Handel's opera Rinaldo.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because we have to remember, too, what are the circumstances under which the kid dies? It's them having sex, which is, again, is one, an act of pleasure, but two, also a procreative act. So I think, again, there are some really interesting juxtapositions that Von Trier is exploring here. And I think that the author from the historian that you were, or was it a historian that you were talking about?
She's a professor of history, so yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that the author's right in one sense that when you juxtapose images like that, it isn't because you're just kind of saying that it's this versus that, but rather you kind of like blow up the dichotomy so that you can say, well, let's kind of scrape underneath the surface and see what we can release. And I think what's released is this idea that, again, nature itself is inherently mysterious and dark and chaotic. And the woman, that she embraces that, but he cannot because, and again, this is in psychoanalytic terms, particularly in Jacques Lacan, male sexuation or male subjectivity always has to control. It always has to cover over things. And that's what is sometimes referred to as like phallogocentrism. As in like phallus and then logos is the word or the arche or the beginning. So you have to control things. You have to define things through the science of logic. Everything is determinate. And ecentrism is that's how everything is. So male sexual subjectivity under kind of conditions of bourgeois Western life, European life, is all about control. Whereas female sexuation has this other element to it. It's defined as the non-all, as this kind of like, it's not covered over. It's the mysterious. It's the rejection of that determinate tendency. And I think that that's kind of what's being played out here.
Okay, so I have two responses. First is that I don't get how it's subversive or like non-misogynistic to make a movie that's basically like men are rational and women are nature, because that's literally like the stereotype that has been used to like dismiss women from like public life and like living in the rational world. But secondly, I actually think it's kind of interesting. The man never expresses any guilt about the kid dying. Only the woman has guilt, and that kind of makes me think that von Trier was playing with the idea of like maternal guilt and in an interesting way, because like
I've heard, but do you not think that the fact that he is kind of repressing his own guilt, does that make him a hypocrite? Maybe I've heard
he cries at the funeral.
He cries at the funeral.
That's not guilt, though. I mean, that's like your kid died. You're sad.
Well, right, but
I'm saying like the mom is literally like, I killed him because I wasn't there to stop him from climbing out the window.
Right, but he kind of, they're talking about the rationale. He's being rational. Like, you didn't know. Like, it's not your fault. Like, why feel guilty? It's an accident.
So I have it's your first point about saying that women are chaotic and outside of rationality as being misogynistic. Well, first of all, I don't know. I think that your reading of it is super valid. And I think one of the reasons this film is interesting to talk about is the fact that there's this kind of bizarre gray area here. But I read this essay by Ian Christie, and he has a pretty interesting thing to say about this. So he talks about the dramatic use of the addict in which she hides all her research materials. And he likens this to the Charlotte Bronte book Jane Eyre, and how we probably all read it in high school, but in that book, there's a notorious mad woman in the attic. And then he says that contemporary feminist perspectives will interpret this as an indictment of 19th century patriarchy casting women as either angels or demons. So it all just depends on if you're reading this movie as, is it a criticism of that kind of casting women off to this kind of more angel/demon primitiveness, or is it just embracing it? And I think that's the weird question that has made this such a controversial film.
I think
this is where the fundamental misunderstanding of psychoanalysis needs to be kind of brought in. Most people think that psychoanalysis is essentially men are X, women are Y. And now there is some of that in Freud, right? He does treat women as the hysteric, right? But it's been expanded, and particularly like in somebody like Lacan. Lacan has a famous phrase where he says there is no sexual relation. And what he means by that is that basically that human bodies, they fill in a place or a structure in society. That's why he refers to it as sexuated or sexuation. And so when he's talking about male subjectivity versus the feminine subjectivity, it's not that males and females or men and women as genders that are already constituted by society, but it's the place that is embodied based on a certain power structure, we might say, or a symbolic structure. And so the male in this particular case, the he, is the obsessive, whereas the female is the hysteric. And the way that we would interpret that is that the male in his rationality is covering the truth with a lie. He has to put words on everything. He has to use science. But the woman, she is actually speaking to the truth, and that's the hysterical discourse. That doesn't mean that women, as in the gender that is the female or woman entity, are all hysteric. It's that there's a particular placedness within a late Western modern society that kind of divides people up, and that people can occupy these spaces. But men can occupy the place of the hysteric, and women can occupy the place of the obsessive as well. That's not the point. The point is to actually destroy all of that and then say at the end, there is no sexual relation, which means that anybody can kind of embody these things. And when we're relating with each other, it's not some sort of like complementarian thing that there are men and there are women, and then they can kind of like you complete me, yin yang kind of thing. It actually kind of blows all of that up and kind of says, no, there are these other kind of structural things that we need to work through. Does that make sense, Amanda?
No.
Okay. but
no, I mean, I might be kind of stupid. No, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like in kind of defending like the feminine wild chaos thing, he's at the same time like objectifying and slightly like dehumanizing women. Like I don't think.
No, but he's not. That's what I mean, though. It's not saying that women are that. Like you're already presuming the gender construction. And he's saying, scrape that, and let's just think, you can almost kind of, and this is why he kind of like later tries to use like mathematical symbols and shit like that, because he realizes that people will get caught up in that. But he's trying to actually destroy that dichotomy itself.
How?
Well, the problem is you can only work within language, right? So like he starts with the presumption that we live in a world that has divided people up in between man and woman. And so, but then he's trying to kind of like disrupt that. We don't need to go into too much Lacan here. We should probably talk more about the movie. Yeah. But I think it'd be interesting to think of how is it that we can think of not just trying to say that it's only that there are these beings that we call men and they have penises, and then there are these beings called women and they have vaginas, but it's kind of like disrupting all of that and saying it's a place that you embody within a society that imposes those structural limitations on you. And then a film like this, by saying that nature actually disrupts all of that, is saying, okay, nature scrapes all of those identities that are constituted themselves away and helps us to then reformulate how it is that we can embody different places in society.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Why does she keep trying to have sex with him after she's mutilated him?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
That to me is literally like she's crazy, and that's like fun for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I've seen this movie probably 3 times. The first 2 times I was convinced. Like, there's no way you can tell me that this movie isn't misogynistic. It's literally what the movie's about.
Yeah.
I find it interesting to entertain the other opinions, and I mean, I don't know. This movie is a big old question mark for me in a lot of ways, but a very hauntingly beautiful, strange-looking question mark.
Yeah. Oh, and just so that I'm clear, it might be misogynistic. It might absolutely. And I think that there probably are some. I think that actually you asked a really good question, Amanda. Does Von Trier like women? And you know what? Now that I think about it, I don't think he does.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think.
And you could probably make that statement even before this movie.
Right, exactly. Like, Nymphomaniac did not like women. Like, not to change them. Nymphomaniac was about a pathologic, like, it was about a sexual woman who was just pathological. And it was, like, not, like, his female characters are not based on any semblance of, like, reality, whereas I do feel like his male characters are.
You know, in Breaking the Waves, I just have to, I don't know, I'd have to rewatch a lot of these movies to really engage with that sentiment. I mean, he's been criticized widely for his treatment of women for his films. Yeah. So this is
this is nothing new.
Yeah.
I get it.
So it might be worth bringing in some of what he has said. So in a statement titled Director's Confessions, Von Trier said, "The work on the script did not follow my usual modus operandi. Scenes were added for no reason. Images were composed free of logic or dramatic thinking. They often came from dreams I was having at the time, or dreams I'd had my entire life. Once again, the subject was nature, but in a different and more direct way than before. In a more personal way, the film does not contain any specific moral code and only has what some might call the bare necessities in the way of plot." And he closes off the statement with saying, "I can offer no excuse for Antichrist."
For me, the whole take on, is it misogynist? I mean, if the contention is that because she's hysterical, and I guess she's supposed to be sitting in for all women, then that makes it I mean, you can make a movie where there is just a crazy woman, and that doesn't mean that it's misogynist, in my opinion.
But it's weird when it's an Edenic allegory, where she's like the essential woman.
She's she, and also there's such a history of like everything that's like. I mean, he references it in the movie. Like, women have been called crazy for everything and then killed for it, and like not been taken seriously because they're crazy. So it's like, it's weird because he's both doing it and acknowledging that it exists, and it's like a very confusing place for me.
Well, it's weird because
she's patronizing to say that women to say that women like are not crazy. Isn't it also patronizing to reproduce the Edenic myth, to say that, well, women are the saviors of the world and they're the ones who
that's also problematic. Like, both are problematic.
And so I think exactly.
Are both
so that's
true,
what I
though?
wonder is this film film not
women are just people.
Well, right, but that's
But like the Zizekian reading would be like, no, that everyone is capable of being a fucked up human. Everybody sucks, right?
Right,
and I
right.
think that in a way, Von Trier is kind of being a misanthrope. And that's why we have to think of it as the allegorical reading, that it's about nature. Because it's about the Edenic myth, which praises women. And the research that she was supposed to be doing on her thesis was all about how like women are the abused, but really they're the pure and they're not the violent. And the whole thing is that no, everything is fucked. And there's nothing that will save us.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the other thing that really bugged me was how she just kind of went from like 0 to 10. Like she went from like I am trying to get over my grieving kid and I'm doing better to like all of a sudden she's tying like a wheel to his foot, and it's crazy. And it's literally crazy.
It
I
is literally
don't
crazy.
actually think you would see a male character go from 0 to 10 like that.
No, but the 0, it's not 0 to 10 because she was before. You find out in the big twist, that she has been like this the whole time. It was all a put on. It was a total manipulation. Her grief in quotation.
No,
marks.
I don't know way.
Yes. What the fuck?
You think that she was
It's
fake?
interesting you say that, because there is one bit when
Absolutely.
she's crying hysterically, and then she stops and she starts laughing.
She
and she
saw
says something.
Oh, but that's
She
like
could have
grief.
stopped the death of the kid, and she didn't. She was
Maybe.
fucking
but
during.
Maybe.
No,
but
absolutely.
you're saying she faked all this grief, and so but then why
To
didn't
me,
she?
that's the big twist of the movie.
Yeah, but
She
why
banged
did
her head against a toilet, like for show.
like what? But
Yes.
why would she wait until they're 3 or 4 days into the woods before she starts going crazy? Why wouldn't she just do it immediately if she's faking it?
Because she is a master manipulator. I mean, dude,
But there was nothing privileged about the position that she was able to get him in which, okay, now is the time for me to hit his genitals with a log.
she is also.
She had plenty of opportunities before. She's crazy.
Yes,
Literally, like
yes,
that
this is a horror
the
movie. This is a psychosexual, fucked up horror movie that takes place out in the cabin. Okay, that like with the weirdest imagery. I mean, this isn't a normal movie.
It is. No one is arguing it's a normal movie.
So Ryan, what's all the stuff with like nature? Like, how do you think that factors into this?
I think that you have articulated it way better than I ever could in this podcast. Is just that the universe is a chaotic place, and human beings can go can go down to that level. I didn't even articulate it well right there. I'm just saying that it's about evil itself, and it's about how I think Lars von Trier very much is a nihilist, cynical fucking sick fuck that really
Hates
wants to make a
women.
movie about how
Hating
much
women.
the earth's about just how much life sucks, the universe sucks, everything sucks.
I mean-
Women suck, men suck. Everything sucks in this movie. Like you said, Jared, making you feel like shit. And Lars von Trier would say, fuck yeah, I accomplished my goal with this film. This is the anti-life movie. This is the Antichrist.
You're right. And I think that's why it's the greatest, like Austin said earlier, it's the great movie to watch opposite Tree of Life. Because it's like
Sure.
the ultimate,
Or
instead of
opposite,
being
like,
life-affirming,
Toy
it's
Story.
life-denying. Here's another good quote from Von Trier. He says, "Truthfully, I can only say I was driven to make this film for that these images came to me and I did not question them. My only defense is, forgive me, for I know not what I do."
Okay,
This precipitates.
He's a total
hilarious.
troll.
Hold on. He says, "This precipitated a bout of giggling." And then he said, "I am really the wrong person to ask what the film means or why it is as it is. It's a bit like asking the chicken about the chicken soup."
See, I think this is why
That's
I think
good.
it's such a Freud. This is why it's such a Freudian film, and I don't mean that in like the Oedipal complex sense, but just like in terms of dreams, because he
Yes.
says that's so interesting. I didn't know that he said that this was inspired by dreams, but if it's inspired by dreams, dreams are always weird. They're enigmatic. We don't understand them, and then one of the prime Freudian meanings that we get out of dreams is that they don't have meaning. So people who try to do the Freud's dream interpretation is that, oh, it means this, but really it means this. That's not at all what Freud is saying. The whole point is that dreams don't mean anything. And it's not until the analysis, when you're analyzing the dream afterwards, that you infuse meaning into this otherwise meaningless set of images that are kind of like erupting as the unconscious is always misrecognized. And it's always that process of misrecognition. And that's what I think we have to think about in this film, is that's why it's confusing. We don't really know what's real and what's not real.
I really
And so
totally. I really want to know what the misogyny. What was she called? The misogyny consultant. Like.
I didn't read that. You read that. That's funny.
Yeah,
though.
yeah. So he literally had a woman credited in the credits as like the misogyny consultant, like ironically referencing the fact that he's called a misogynist. And I just want to know like what her role was and if there was anything she was like, no, this went too far.
Well, probably. So in this Ian Christie thing, there's a 1485 treatise by Catholic Church Inquisitor Heinrich Kramer called The Hammer of Witches, which is apparently where a lot of the notes in her thesis was drawn from. And this text claimed that women are by nature instruments of Satan, by nature carnal, a structural defect rooted in the original creation. So I would imagine it has something to do with that, just like she probably helped with the production design in the attic, I would assume.
Yeah. That makes sense. I feel like I'm settling on he's talking about misogyny and like reacting to it and actually like interrogating it, but he also like is misogynistic and can't like take that out of his work.
Throwing it in your face. You know, he wants to just, he doesn't want to just make a comment, you know, like a fable about it. He wants to throw it in your fucking face and watch you react to it and be shocked.
Right, but if like you're like anti-Semitic, I don't want to see your anti-Semitic film.
I mean, that's a point to be, that's a good point. I'm just saying, like
so I don't want to see.
He's a transgressive
I don't want to
artist.
see Triumph of the Will.
Gigi Allen came out and threw shit at people, and some people think he's a great fucking artist. I don't know. I don't, but some people do.
It could just be implicit bias more than anything, too,
Yeah, no,
right?
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And that's exactly, I think what you just said is probably pretty spot on, that he is making a film about this problematic element of gender dynamics in Western society, but nevertheless, he can't escape his own like implicit bias towards women, and that just screams in every scene.
Right. Like he can't not have her not be like doing her mutilation shit without pants on. Like that's just necessary for art reasons. I don't know.
More to just like Charlotte Gainsbourg, like what a soldier. Can you imagine asking anybody to do to do that she does?
Just give her a big old golf clap and a big old yay. For Charlotte Gainsbourg. And let's give her a thug life. I mean,
it doesn't get any realer than her in terms of an actress or
highly
an actor.
recommend a very little known movie that no one's ever seen. I would love to know what you think about this movie. It's called Jackie and the Kingdom of Women. Okay. It's somewhere out there on the internet, and it was, I think, a French movie, and it's basically like a reverse Cinderella movie, where, or like reverse Handmaid's Tale, where all the men are kind of like little minions of the women, and then the princess is throwing a big ball, and all the men are trying to become her prince. You gotta watch it. It's Jackie and the Kingdom of Women. Okay. It is ridiculous.
I'm intrigued.
and she is the princess.
Who made that film?
I don't remember, but it got no play out here. No one, or I don't think it even got distributed.
Couple things
It is interesting to think of what von Trier's, isn't his next film Melancholia?
Yeah, it's called the Depression Trilogy, and this is the first one. It's this, Melancholia, and then I guess Nymphomaniac.
Right.
And
Nymphomaniac 1 and 2?
Yeah. Well, it's all one film, but I guess they just split it into
it's like 5 hours long.
Or something.
And then the house that Jack built that's just a new standalone movie.
Maybe that's the third one. I haven't seen that.
I haven't either, but I'm dreading it, but excited about it.
All right, so you brought up
it didn't get me excited.
A couple things I want to go through before we go into the mailbag. So you brought up, Ryan, the whole shoes thing. So this is also from that Ian Christie article. He says, when Defoe discovers from the autopsy report that his son had misshapen feet and the family photographs that show that she systematically put the shoes on the wrong feet, we are of course reminded of the devil's traditional cloven hooves. Wow. Was she grooming the child to be an Antichrist? I don't know if I necessarily buy that. And then did you guys notice at the end it was dedicated to Tarkovsky?
Yes. What the F? Like,
yeah.
Do you think Tarkovsky would be like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, I don't need that.
Thanks a lot, Lars.
So this is what Ian Christie has to say. He says, we're accustomed to the idea of nature being benevolent and healing, but for many centuries, the natural world was viewed with fear and suspicion as the source of both living and supernatural dangers. This perhaps explains the Tarkovsky dedication. It may be the harsh medieval world of Andrei Rublev, or the impending nuclear apocalypse that hovers over the sacrifice, or something more elemental that he's channeling from Tarkovsky, the vivid, almost incestuous dreams of Yvonne's childhood, or the engulfing forest of the mirror, at once nurturing and threatening. So he's saying that if the movie is in fact about nature, which, by the way, I think is definitely the best read on this film, that it's maybe just drawing on Tarkovsky's treatment of nature or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, von Trier has said multiple times that Tarkovsky is the greatest filmmaker ever. So it doesn't surprise. I mean, I almost wonder if it's like a spiritual dedication more than like letter of the law thing. Just like he would say that all of his films are probably dedicated. But this one, for whatever reason, he probably felt like it was more connected. But I don't know. Maybe.
I want to spend some time also talking about just the form of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so unique and so damn effective. I mean, part of the reason why this movie is so hard to watch is because von Trier is so good at subjective filmmaking in a way that's tailor-made to make you feel like shit. So the movie is abnormally quiet at parts. There's jump cuts, framing towards far ends of the frame, handheld camera. It's not at all concerned about maintaining focus. There are explicitly jarring cuts. They'll cut mid-camera movement. It's deliberately ugly and unnerving. The dialogue is extremely bassy. There's the weird breathing lenses, melting landscapes. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're distorted in the background.
There's one moment that really speaks to just how highly subjective the camera movement is. So when the acorns first start falling on the ceiling, they're sleeping, and as soon as Willem Dafoe's character wakes up, the camera widens out when the first one drops. It's like identifying with their perspective. And this is what is done throughout the whole thing. So it's not only that the characters on screen are feeling like shit, but he will just grab you and put you into their perspective as much as he can.
I love the one when they're fucking on the bed, and then it goes right into the roses, like the dead ends of the roses.
Yeah.
You know
The nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I love the one where they're fucking in the woods and
like
all
that
the
one too.
hands come out.
Yes,
That
of
to
the
me,
tree.
That was my favorite moment of the movie by far.
I
'cause it
love
was
the one
just-
when they're
it was
fucking
so
in the.
weird.
Oh, you guys were just saying you love the one when they were fucking.
No, like what was
but-
the hand thing? Like I actually think the hand thing might have been kind of feminist.
Well, are they all they're
Well, so
all
here's the
dead
thing
women,
is-
right?
Yeah,
all those people
exactly.
are dead.
So yeah.
Right. Here's the interesting thing. At the very end, the epilogue the prologue. Wait, which one? The epilogue at the end.
Yeah.
Where all the women are kind of like coming out of the woods and they descend upon him. But then at the same time, prior to that, the scene before that, he's walking and you just see a bunch of like dead people, right? And so it's like almost like that he's surrounded by death, that nature is just death. What's going on with the women kind of ascending upon him at the end? Are they coming to crush him, to kill him? They're not his savior, I can't imagine, because they're quite menacing. No?
I think they're just
What's going on?
they're passing by him and their faces are blurred, which was also
Yeah.
weird. So they're explicitly women. They're just passing him though. They're not, like he's already enveloped in them by the time it cuts to credits. So I don't think they're trying to kill him, but there is definitely something deliberate about the fact that they're all women and their faces are blurred.
And that she was doing her thesis on gynocide. So like I think it's like the legacy of women who have been killed by the patriarchy. Like I think it was like an attempt at like a feminist statement. I don't think
Well,
it
it's
worked.
interesting, Jared, because you've got all the dogma elements of like the shaky kind of subjective camera movements, kind of crash zooms and jump cuts and things like that. But then you also have like I think it was either Ryan or Jared mentioned at the beginning, these beautiful HD slow-mo Alexa shots. And then you've also the opening scene, the black and white. As much as there's kind of a messiness about some of the camera movements, there's also like a perfection about some of it. Like there's this one shot in particular where it's them having sex and the camera moves to like three different like focal positions. And so it like zooms into the camera and then it pulls out and then it like pulls out again. So your focus is actually on like three different points, but it's the same camera shot. And so there's also at the same time this really like perfect formalistic intent that kind of juxtaposes the messiness. And I think that is really interesting as well, how he uses both at certain points to kind of disrupt the viewing experience. And he does that in Melancholia as well. Melancholia is maybe a little bit more on the perfection side, though. It's a little bit more stylized even.
I also feel like the jump cuts are really good at making you like occupy the mind of somebody who's like a little bit crazy, because I would be like, did I just blink and like miss like a very reasonable cut to a different shot? But then I'd be like, I started to realize, no, it's literally just all jump shot.
The movie's trying to drive you crazy.
Yeah, literally. And it worked. I'm crazy right now. Yeah,
for sure. All right. Anything else you guys want to bring? Oh, we didn't talk about the three beggars. I don't really have much to say about this.
I don't even know what that is, yeah.
So there's pain, despair, and grief. The bird, the doe, and the fox, chaos reigns. The best descriptor of it that I was able to dig up is that whereas the three kings heralded birth in the Christ story, the three beggars herald death in Antichrist. I liked that explanation. But I didn't really have anything besides that. Because Von Trier says that so first of all, this whole movie was born out of the fact that he underwent some severe depression for like 2 years. And he underwent some sort of like shamanistic, psychedelic experience to try and draw him out of it. And apparently there he met a fox that looks like the fox in the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Also, another behind the scenes thing. There's all these weird stories of crazy kind of on-set behavior, where he basically, like, the producers knew he was going through stuff while he was making this movie, but he wanted to be making it still, and he would be just in his trailer and just kind of sometimes be like, all right, we're not going to film today. Lars can't make it out, but that was just part of the process.
Shit.
And on top of, putting Charlotte Gainsborough through hell, and there was some weird, and he never flies anywhere. You know about that about him?
I didn't know that.
like
little trivia
Hitchcock,
fact.
right?
I did not know that.
He's scared to death of it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Weird.
Or he'll
Interesting.
Well, wait, so he took a boat to Cannes?
Probably.
Okay.
Makes sense. Well, he can't go anymore. He's kicked out.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, didn't he come back? Wasn't Jack or whatever?
Yeah,
it's called,
I think that's
play?
right. He did get persona non grata.
He did?
Yeah.
He did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because his last film,
Cool.
the one that you guys were talking about, the one that stars Matt Dillon or whatever, played there.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go into the mailbag. Hit us up at 213-534-8807
Or
21-ELFGUT07.
that's right.
Let's-
Elf Hut.
Or Elf Hut.
Yeah, it's fine.
Either way.
I'm trying to figure out which one I like better. Elf Hut makes more sense. Elf Gut is kind of weird.
Why? I think all elves have guts.
Sure, but Elf
They got to worry
Gut?
about gut bacteria, too.
I guess I like Elf Gut, but Elf Hut, it seems fun. I want to go to the Elf
Oh,
Hut.
yeah. I
It's
don't
like
want to go
Pizza
to the
Hut.
Elf Gut.
I want nothing to do with Elf Guts.
Yeah, me neither.
It's full of candy. Okay.
I feel like you can pick.
Okay. So we're going to hear from Anon, Striking Vipers. What you got?
Hey, first-time caller, long-time listener, I guess. So I just listened to the Wisecrack episode on Striking Vipers, and I definitely had some opinions on how the episode kind of just missed a lot of opportunities when it came to analyzing relationship dynamics, especially with the way that dating apps have kind of evolved relationships into more polyamory-focused, more hookup-focused. A lot of more people, I think, definitely are interested in sort of kink relationships now, too. And the episode had a lot of chances to kind of analyze that sort of dominant, submissive side of relationships if the wife had joined in, for example, on the game and had taken more of an active role. If the characters themselves were more open to exploring polyamory between Carl, the wife, and I forget what Anthony Mackie's character was called.
Danny.
It would have definitely been a lot more fascinating in terms of seeing how relationships are evolving with dating apps, with virtual reality, going off of the what was the term called? Off Avatar, where the last Avatar example that you guys gave, with how avatars affect how people interact after they've gone out of the simulation, looking at how maybe those character relationships change based off the way they interact in terms of the relationship itself, not just in terms of, oh, hey, we're going to see if Anthony Mack's character and Carl kiss and then nothing happens out of that. No, seeing how the characters themselves change based off of their roles within the simulation, within Striking Vipers, it would have been a much better opportunity in terms of analyzing relationship dynamics and how games and how virtual reality affect them. Anyways, just my thoughts. Also, I thought it was interesting how, I forget his name, but the other speaker during this episode was basically pushing for an orgy in the game of, hey, why didn't the wife join in? Hey, why didn't Carl invite a few of his guys and like girlfriends into the game? That was just kind of fun. But anyways, let me...
Thanks, Anon. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of people look at that episode with, I thought they were going to say blank, or I wish they would have said blank, because obviously there's a lot of other things with gender, obviously with the guy inhabiting an avatar of a woman. There's also the whole race thing with them being black men and both inhabiting the avatar of Asians. But the episode didn't really take a stance and just kind of raised questions with all those issues, which, I don't know, I think is a solid choice.
I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I thought it was
you
cool.
can't please everybody. I think sometimes asking the question is enough.
It was interesting. I thought the episode did take a stand. I just thought it was the weak liberal stand rather than the more radical left stand, which is what I think the caller is insinuating. And it was me that mentioned, why didn't the wife join in? Why didn't they explore these different themes? I think there was a real lost opportunity to be able to explore these larger issues of pansexuality and things like that, that the film or the episode kind of hints at, but then it ultimately backs off and it retreats by just making this some sort of contractual thing at the end where they have an agreement, which again, contract is just like abstract rights, Hobbesian liberalism. And I was kind of like, I thought that was kind of like a cheap choice. It would have been much more interesting to go into like the radical construction of identity itself. And I think that's what the speakers talk, or the caller was talking about, with like exploring polyamory in a much more inventive and creative way. I would have liked to have seen that. But I mean, I can't fucking hate on somebody for not making the film that I would have made or something like that, you know?
Right.
So.
But it is still like fundamentally like they're still repressed 364 days a year. So like, yeah, I see what you're saying. That's interesting.
And that was my frustration, is that it doesn't deal with that repression.
Yeah.
Because remember, it all came down to how you interpret it. Was there that look of forlorn and that they just couldn't actually kiss in real life because they were too beholden to the pressures of societal expectations? And so there are these issues of black queer identity that could have been explored, I think, a little bit more fruitfully. But again, they just retreat to, I think, a kind of safe response, which is... Well, it makes sense.
I've got an email that directly addresses this idea of repression that you're talking about. Interested what you guys think about this. So this email is from John. He says, I think there's a missing perspective from your podcast on striking vipers, and that is of Danny. Carl is single and adventurous, so he is much more interesting in the sense of exploring sexuality in the virtual world, but Danny has family, so his perspective connected to me personally since I have a family with small children, and I'm also somebody who has seen a steep drop in my sex life due primarily to a sense of boredom in my relationship. I don't think you really explored that dimension either because you didn't relate or because you didn't want to admit you relate. I don't blame you if it's the latter. I think that if I was a character in any fiction, my marriage would be doomed, but I don't feel that way. I make up for a lack of passionate love. What's funny?
What's so funny about that?
Passionate love with I make up for a lack of passionate love with platonic love. I love the family we have in our home. It's not perfect, but I am happy and committed. That is my true self. That is the me I aspire to be. My sexuality is going off in a different direction, but I am not only my sexuality, and I feel a bit lonely sometimes. It's funny because one of the ways I've tried to deal with this is to develop closer relationships with my dude friends, and surprise, surprise, we bond over video games. Right now, there is a barrier between me and them sexually since I'm not aroused by the idea of having sex with a man, but maybe strong VR could break that restriction, changing my friends into avatars I am attracted to, or possibly even artificially changing my sexual preferences based on the preferences of my own avatar. Anyway, I found this episode very powerful since it's basically about me and it affirms the duality of my existence. Danny isn't a bad guy, he gets his family life and is tryst with his bro at the end. This makes me hopeful for my future. Every other piece of fiction would have me told that I was a terrible person for staying in a less than passionate relationship. From John.
Amen, John.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't think that we need to politicize the fact that not everybody will get to have a ecstatic, passionate life.
Well, and what I was going to say to y'all's points a second ago is that I'm glad that they didn't go in the directions y'all are saying. Like, I liked it. It was like it was about two best friends and their favorite video game, and that at some point technology advanced to where they could fuck as them. You know, that is what this 1 hour Black Mirror episode was about, and it was great in that sense. I'm glad that John related to it in that idea, and it is kind of a bittersweet you know,
It is
ending.
bittersweet.
You know, like everyone gets what they want, but are they really happy? And you kind of have that question at the end. You know, but it's kind of inspiring that they're making it work at the same time. It's the Modern Family, you know.
Very modern.
So I think it's that was a good email, John.
I
Thanks.
highly appreciate John's honesty.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I think that maybe the only reason we didn't get into it is just because we didn't have time. But that experience of losing your sexual desire in a long-term relationship is extremely common, right? But I love is it John? I love what he said, that he kind of has these other ways of experiencing what he called platonic love. But I would even say, let's not say that, but it's libidinal love. It's erotic love. It is still desire. And playing a video game, and that's one of the things that's interesting about Striking Vipers, is that there's a libidinal investment into those things. It doesn't mean you literally want to fuck everybody you play a video game with, but libido is just pleasure, and it's like this erotic impulse that is kind of that is like calling you into things. And I think that we can find that in video games, or in family, or in sport, or in books that we read, or in movies, or in podcasting. So let's just embrace the fact that we're all kind of like libidinally engaging with each other right now, and it's lovely and wonderful.
It's adorable.
All right. We are all still reeling from Antichrist, so I'm going to do one more from the mailbag. Also, if you guys want to send us an email, it's movies@wisecrack.co. This one is from Mike. This is about Toy Story 4. You guys see Toy Story 4?
Oh man, no, I haven't.
I haven't.
I'm gonna
you
see
want
it
me to
this
spoil
week.
it?
Yeah.
All right, I don't want to spoil it. Okay,
thanks, man.
do we have another Striking Viper? All right, well, everyone seems to have seen Striking Vipers, so So this one is more about what I was saying before. This one is from Christian. He says, just listen to your podcast on the Black Mirror episode Striking Vipers, and I wanted to share my two main thoughts. One, technology extends sexuality. Danny and Carl both seem to be extremely distraught about their sexual encounters via this new technology. This either means they had these feelings all along and were hiding them, or that technology has created a new branch of their sexuality. I would argue it's the latter. Mm-hmm. That's actually me saying that, not him. This is back to the email. I feel that the kiss scene establishes in the canon that there are two straight men whose sexuality is only extended by technology but remains intact. So instead of being turned gay by the video game, they are shown that their sexuality has other levels that their biology won't allow them to explore, which echoes the sentiments from the cult classic Videodrome. Which leads me to my second point. Striking Vipers is a trans metaphor. I've heard a few people mock this episode for being a no bro, it's not gay bro, this doesn't mean we're gay bro piece of media, when I feel like its message was a bit different. I see it as saying sexuality, which is usually considered based on biology, i.e. someone being born straight or gay, can instead be influenced by technology. This allows Carl to be a straight man, and with the help of technology, he can explore sexuality as a straight woman. Though the idea wasn't explicitly stated in the episode, I see some strong trans themes being approached through the metaphor of virtual reality in video games. Whether it is helpful or hurtful, I think it's hard to deny that Striking Vipers is making an attempt to explore transsexuality in a way that reaches people who don't have any experience with it. So, I mean, so first of all, I definitely agree with the technology extending sexuality thing. As far as Striking Vipers as trans metaphor, I mean, it's funny he says that I think it's hard to deny that it's making an attempt to explore this, but I would almost say I think it's hard to deny that it's evading exploring this, because it seems like it's so, that's what everyone would expect. It's so, and even in that conversation where Carl in the Asian woman's avatar explains what it's like to be a female and a female orgasm, there isn't really anything about like, oh, I'm feeling a new sense of identity or a quote-unquote real sense of identity that would have more explicitly connected with trans issues. So I feel like, yes, because the premise seems like it's very ripe for trans issues, I think the episode is pretty much avoiding it.
Yeah. It's not.
I mean, that was kind of one of my things is it's not necessarily inherently problematic, and I don't mean in the culture war sense, but I mean philosophically, like that it doesn't explore enough or whatever. But I don't think that it's inherently problematic that they necessarily embody the heteronormative relationship. But I do think there is something limiting in it. That it is interesting that the only way they can relate to each other in their like avatar selves is via the heteronormative relationship of a boy and a girl, or a man and a woman,
and
right?
like a hyper masculine, hyper feminine man and woman.
Yeah, Yeah, and we could say it's problematic, or we could say it's interesting because that shows the limitation of the societal restraints, that even though they have some level of freedom in this virtual world, that they still can't escape these other constraints.
I think that's totally right.
But do you also think that when you're playing a video game with your buddy, and it's a video game that you guys have played a lot, you have a character that you play, and you're good at that character.
Exactly.
And I feel like if you extend that metaphor, that you're probably better at sex with the character that you're really familiar with, too.
But it's still just interesting that he gravitated towards a woman. Like a hyper-feminine woman.
In as much as when they were playing the non-VR version, he gravitated towards a woman
Yeah.
as
I mean,
well.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
like,
it's
is
not.
it?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was just say, does it say something? You know, if I pick Princess Peach, you know, from in Mario Kart,
It says something. I don't know if it's anything relevant.
but yeah,
It definitely says something, and I think we should explore this on my couch, Ryan.
when he said, like, you know, oh, like some people have called this I'm not gay, bro, this isn't gay, bro, piece of media. I mean,
It literally is.
I think that is kind of a funny genre, subgenre, because it is like the only way that they're cool with it is like, oh, well, it's a guy and a girl, you know. So yeah, that you know, that's.
But
not
I don't
gay,
think it's that they're
you know?
cool. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if they were both of their mains, you know, using mains as main characters, you know, like nerd speak. If their mains were both dudes, maybe they would have fucked as dudes. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't
But isn't
think
that
so.
I don't know. I
interesting?
think it's a
I don't
very
think so.
specific choice.
Oh,
I think it's
I
about the
agree with
primacy
Amanda.
of like heterosexuality, that like even though he's like a man embodying a woman, that's still more acceptable than being two men like experiencing their desire together.
Definitely. It's a whole different thing. I'm just speculating about the lore.
My speculation is that if both of their mains were men, that they would not have hooked up.
I agree.
And that it's only because Carl was a woman that they
Yeah,
even
you're probably
thought
right.
about it. They're like, I could have sex with you right now. Okay.
See, now the
And the-
sequel
and the other
Striking
thing,
Viper should
too-
be when it's like, you know, one of them's a Kirby and the other one's a Jigglypuff. And then they're like, what do we do?
Oh my God, the imagery.
Well, he does fuck a polar bear. Remember?
That's true. He
That's
does fuck a
true.
polar bear. All right, well, we're going to end it on fucking polar bears. Where can we
Yeah.
find you guys on the internet? Ryan.
Oh man, you can find me on that YouTube, baby. On I got a game show called Ryan's Game Show. I have my garage that I'm moving out of this week. It's so sad.
R.I.P. garage.
After 8 years. But and Ryan Shorts, release comedy shorts every week. But because I've been moving, haven't done it in about a week or two. Go back and watch the old ones though. I think
You know, you guys,
think you'll
well,
like it.
she lives on that street now.
Yeah.
Awesome. All of my stuff is on the sidewalk right now. Sorry.
Oh, interesting. Okay. We'll talk addresses later. You can find me. I tweet sporadically at Amanda Shirker.
And Austin.
Yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter, Austin_Hayden. I do a philosophy podcast called Owls at Dawn. We actually did an episode on Striking Vipers as well. It was a bonus episode, but we'll be releasing it on the main stream in a I don't know, couple months probably, or a couple weeks probably. So, but you can check that shit out.
All right, guys, we're going to sign off. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Peace.
Chaos.
Later.
Everyone together now. Chaos reigns.